Tu matatia turamatia, te tuapapa o te matatu Aotearoa, ki runga, ki raro, ki uta, ki tai. Koia ko te manakitanga, te whanaungatanga, te pono me te whakamana i te ako. Homie, huie, dai ki e. E te ti, e te tā, e ngā iwi katoa. Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai ki tēnei piringa rauhuia, ki tēnei huihuinga kōrero. Whakatau mai rā ki tēnei tere rauhuia, navigating the professional realm of generative artificial intelligence for teachers. Ko Kim Bonington toku ingoa, ko au tētahi o ngā tohu mātua mō te matatu Aotearoa. My name is Kim Bonington, and I'm one of the senior advisors here at the Teaching Council, and I am a teacher. Ngā tikanga matatika mō te haipapa ngaiotanga, the Code of Professional Responsibility, explains that as teachers, we understand the influence we have on shaping futures and the contribution we make to society by supporting children and young people to realise their potential and prepare them for their future. We understand that families and whānau and the wider community trust us to guide their children and young people on their learning journey and to keep them safe. By acting with integrity and professionalism in all that we do, we maintain this trust and confidence. So today we will explore how teachers navigate the intersection of commitments of the teaching profession, knowledge, culture, professional judgment, and the application of generative AI tools in the classroom. And as we embrace the potential of AI tools in education, it is crucial to ensure that cultural values and the aspirations of whānau are not only respected, but also reflected in our teaching practices. Together, we will discuss strategies and best practices to avoid bias, uphold cultural narratives, and promote diversity in the classroom. Nau mai kia piri, nau mai kia tata, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora, everyone. Welcome. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we invite our first presenter to speak. This symposium consists of presentations from two speakers, during which your microphone will be turned off. After the presentations, there will be a breakout room which will allow space for you to discuss the presentations, your learnings, and how those learnings can be applied to your context. You'll be able to see that we have enlisted the service of New Zealand Sign Language interpreters from Connect Interpreting. Thank you, Bridie and Tanya. If you require this service during the breakout rooms, can you please pop a message into the chat? You will need to send that to the Rauhuia admin person, and we'll be able to arrange for either Bridie or Tanya to be in that chat room with you. For display purposes, we recommend using the side-by-side view of Zoom, and this will give you the view of the presentation and the presenters and the sign language interpreters at the same time. Now, a recording of the symposium will be put up on the Teaching Council website in due course, and a copy of the presenters' slides will be emailed to you in the next couple of days. I'm now going to hand over to Roseanne to introduce our first speaker.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Roseanne London tōku ingoa, ko Aotearoa o ngā tohu mātua mō te matatu Aotearoa. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Dr. Karaitiana Taiuru. Dr. Taiuru is a leading authority and a highly accomplished visionary Māori technology ethicist specialising in Māori rights with artificial intelligence, Māori data sovereignty and governance with emerging digital technologies and biological sciences. He brings with him his extensive expertise in mātauranga, tikanga Māori, tiriti and advocacy for digital Māori rights and a profound understanding of the intersection between Māori knowledge and emerging technologies. Thank you, Dr. Karaitiana Taiuru.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. It's my hope that you'll learn and hear a unique perspective about Te Ao Māori and Te Tiriti when using artificial intelligence. I've broken the presentation up into 4 slides. I'm hoping we'll get through this in enough time. I often start PowerPoint presentations with this slide, stating that we're at a crossroads with artificial intelligence. And so, I'm a firm believer that teachers, academics, lecturers, and anyone with the ability who can teach artificial intelligence will actually help empower and decolonize Māori, but not only Māori, other communities whom I can't speak on behalf of, such as women, minority ethnic groups, minority religious groups, disabled communities, etc. So for me, this is an exciting time in terms of evolution and artificial intelligence. So just recently, I was at a conference with the Y262 claimants. Now, the Y262 claimants are largely deceased now, but they made a claim to the Waitangi Tribunal for all Māori intellectual property rights to be considered. Their lead lawyer, Leo Watson, he stated that there's 3 catastrophes that face Māori in 2024. The first catastrophe is global warming. Basically, many marae in the country will be impacted by global warming, as will many of us. Genetic modification, because if it's not done properly, it could breach our tikanga, be very offensive, and cause a number of issues which we're yet to fully understand. But more importantly, it was recognised that artificial intelligence is a potential to be a catastrophe. And one of those reasons is that Māori aren't at the decision-making table with artificial intelligence, nor is there enough resources and education about artificial intelligence. So when I talk about digital colonization, this is a brief timeline of colonization through emerging technologies. It's not fully detailed. There are gaps, but essentially, it's based on my personal opinions that from 1984, when the internet was first introduced in New Zealand, we rolled it out without consideration of Te Ao Māori, Te Tiriti. Then in 1992, that Y262 claim was filed. That didn't directly talk about digital or artificial intelligence, but all the principles relate directly to artificial intelligence. Then we saw the introduction of social media. I think many of us will understand the privacy issues with the web and align with the privacy issues with data sovereignty and Te Ao Māori issues. 2001, we saw the government, in 2020, we saw the government create an algorithm charter as their way of dealing with racism and discrimination with artificial intelligence, such as algorithms. Unfortunately, that didn't do the job. And then 2001, Māori got together, in 2016, and we formed Māori Data Sovereignty Network. And that network is still in existence today. And bringing us to our presentation today, in about 2022, artificial intelligence, or ChatGPT, became a household name. Although AI has been around since the end of World War II, most people actually got to hear about AI and practice with it just recently. And again, it's the wild, wild west, and people such as myself are trying to discuss some of the issues with that. And another issue that Māori have with AI is by estimates, there's about 34 Māori individuals in the AI industry. That accounts for a 0.0x of Māori representatives in New Zealand. We know that many of those people work in academia. by the last count was that we have 14 Māori academic staff who are AI researchers. We have a few Māori companies, and those companies keep on increasing, but not to the stage where we have a strong Māori voice. For a long time now, we've heard that data is the new oil. So, I mean, if we consider that data is the world's new oil, we have to consider that AI is probably like the new electricity, as transforming technology at such a fast pace. It's very difficult to keep up with. So when I'm talking about data and Māori data, I'm talking about mātauranga Māori. So mātauranga Māori, it comes from our ancestors. It comes from our traditional knowledge. It comes from the knowledge that we're creating today, that as teachers you create. And it's also whatever our future generations create for us. So it's, mātauranga Māori is before, as present, and it's the future. When I talk about data and Māori data, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that the Y262 claim, which I've already discussed, it talks about intellectual property rights, but also like to talk about the Y2522 claim, which the Waitangi Tribunal recognised that Māori data is a taonga and that Māori data sovereignty includes governance. But more importantly, it stated that all algorithms should be open and transparent to avoid bias. It's also important when using artificial intelligence to remember that mātauranga Māori isn't considered in any intellectual property rights of New Zealand. It's not consistent with the Copyright Act. It's not really considered with the Patents Act. While we do have some recognition in the Trademarks Act, the law hasn't caught up with us in regards to artificial intelligence. We should also consider that we have Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Te Whakaputanga. We've got the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We have a High Court case with the COVID data that talks about data. And we have the Supreme Court who recognises that tikanga Māori is New Zealand's first common law. So when we're using Māori data in AI, we need to actually consider what we can and can't use. So it's important to apply Māori data sovereignty principles. But so essentially that is saying, if you have data or mātauranga that could be sensitive, you shouldn't put it into AI. For example, someone's genealogy, their whakapapa, should never go into AI. If it's something that's on the news, something that's common, sure, put it into AI. But it's also a good idea to understand where that knowledge came from and who owns that mātauranga. I always suggest that when people are practicing with AI, depending on which AI you're using, don't use any identifying data such as email accounts, birth dates, addresses, etc., etc. And when you can, turn off the history and or delete all of your prompts. So I'm just going to give a quick introduction about artificial intelligence from a Te Ao Māori perspective. So as teachers, you may end up with Māori students who will say, oh, what's artificial intelligence? How do you explain that to me? Or you might be a kura kaupapa Māori teacher. So whenever I talk about AI from a whakaaro Māori, a Māori perspective, I talk about AI as not just a computer. It's not just something on your phone or on the internet. It's an embodiment of our thoughts, of our mātauranga. And so from a traditional Māori perspective, we can talk about deities such as Hindi Ngaro, the deity of thoughts and thinking. I like to consider or talk about AI being Maui. And our traditional knowledge talks about Maui being extremely inquisitive, but he always got in trouble. All the stories that are published talk about him, being in trouble. But if he has some guardrails, he would actually be a a leader and an innovator. Another way to consider artificial intelligence is considering it being like the Pacific Ocean. It's as vast, it's not fully explored, but to use AI, you need a certain amount of knowledge, and anyone can use AI. And then there are some experts who arguably know lots and lots about AI, but still don't know everything about AI. In the same way we do about our oceans. We can have fishermen, we can have stargazers, astronomers, water scientists, etc. But it's not likely that one person will know everything. But at all times, we have to be cautious of what we do with AI. It can give to us, but it can also take from us. It's important to consider that anything you type into it or add to an AI, there might be one or two exceptions to this, but anything that you put in will be owned by the company that owns that AI. So this includes any questions that you type, question or answers that you suggest that aren't quite right. And so at this stage, we don't have any regulation in New Zealand to protect us. I think it's important to note that countries like China and the EU do have protection mechanisms in place. But from a Te Ao Māori perspective, we're not quite ready for regulation of AI. We still need legislation to be updated, such as the Copyright, online digital harm. The Digital Harm Communications Act also needs to be updated before we consider regulating AI. I also like to talk about artificial intelligence being reminiscent of our colonial ethnographers. So history has shown us that they were typically white men who traveled around the country, who didn't have any considerations for anything that Māori owned. They didn't care about anything that was sacred. And so they took all of this information, all of our mātauranga Māori, and they wrote books. They recreated history. There's many stories where the early ethnographers refused to speak to women because they were shown because of the misogynist views. So there was a lot of history that didn't actually get published because of those thinkings. And this is exactly the same as with artificial intelligence. So I'm just going to use one example here of how traditional knowledge has been manipulated and explained wrong. So when I talk about Maui, I think many people who were born and went to school in New Zealand would have read a book about Maui. So typically the books will tell us that Maui was he was mischief, he was rebellious, he stole, he manipulated people for his own benefits. So what we do know, we'll also be told in the books that Maui fished up the sun with his fish hook, or fished up the islands of New Zealand with a fish hook. Now, when we look at the proper traditional knowledge of these stories, Maui didn't actually sneer the sun. Our old stories tell us how Maui was a navigator, and the story about the sun was using personifications and other forms of narratives to say that Maui was a narrator, and the more he travelled down the Pacific, the longer the days become. And so that analogy of sneering the sun up is basically talking about him being an explorer. And we do know that our ethnographers did not want Māori, mātauranga Māori, to be seen as superior or as a science. So we have lots of these stories that have been mixed up. We also know that up until about 2000, 2002, computers did not, they weren't by default, couldn't create a macron. My early career in the computer industry was trying to figure out how to make a computer use a macron. So we've also had decades of the Māori language being spelt wrong because of technology. So Maui should have a macron A instead of no macron. So this is just one example of how artificial intelligence can manipulate and produce incorrect stories. So we know that with generative artificial intelligence, it does have a decent amount of Mātauranga Māori. We do know that it can learn Te Reo Māori and it can translate Te Reo Māori. I guess the quality, it depends on who you are. I think for a lot of average speakers of Te Reo Māori, the translations are okay. For language experts, not so. There's also concerns that artificial intelligence will create new dialects of Te Reo Māori. There's concerns that AI have just taken language resources off the internet and from other places without permission. So again, we're going to see AI create a new dialect of Te Reo Māori, much the same way as the early Christian explorers, the early Christians did when they created or wrote the Te Paipera Tapu, the Bible in Te Reo Māori. They didn't consider dialects. They just used predominantly Waikato dialect, ignoring everyone else's dialect. So even today, in 2024, we're still struggling with dialectal revival. Now, we also know that AI can create images. So I'm going to talk a bit more about images at the next lot of slides. We know that some organizations do use generative AI for translations. It's become highly offensive for Māori language translators because this takes away their livelihood. They see it as another form of colonization and theft of their Mātauranga Māori. We did see, so this is an older slide, but we did see the very first day the New Zealand Herald used some AI in their translations, that the words were repeated, they were out of sync. And this tells us that if we're going to use any generative AI for any sort of questions or information, we have to have a human checking it. I could spend an hour giving examples of how generative AI have provided false information about anything in Te Ao Māori. But we also know that if you are using an automated bot for moderation, it can become racist, misogynist, and abusive. Perhaps the most famous case was with Microsoft. They used a bot for moderation, and it started repeating anti-Jewish slogans, misogynist, abuse, a whole lot of terms which I'm not going to repeat here, but it was quite shocking. So there's something else we have to be aware of when using generative AI. So some ways to get around bias and false information with AI is by applying Te Tiriti AI principles. I'm not going to go through these just because of the time, but these are based on the Hauora report, Te Tiriti principles, where we're ensuring that Māori are part of the whole life cycle of AI development, of overseeing the data, and providing feedback of anything that, of all outputs. So Māori Art with AI, this is becoming a hot topic. So I saw even this morning, there was a discussion on a TV program this morning, which I haven't watched yet, but I've certainly seen the commentary about it. And I've also seen a number of teachers in different online forums talking about using AI with art. So I just want to highlight the fact that intellectual property rights, Māori intellectual property rights, are not considered a legal right in New Zealand or anywhere in the world for that matter. And I just want to highlight the fact, or remind people about what cultural appropriation is. So it's basically when a majority group takes a minority's culture's elements and creates new art or reproduces it without permission. Usually it's disrespectful and it's done in a stereotypical way. But this, and it's also worthwhile pointing out that it's not illegal. Yes, your students could do it, but it is immoral. Here are 3 images that I've taken from Māori artists. I think these are created by Māori, and they are portrayed as being Māori art. Now, the picture with the female with the green tattoo or moko kauai, the neck. So this has been portrayed as being an amazing way of using AI to create Māori art. From a Te Ao Māori perspective, there's numerous concerns here. There's the concern that what's portrayed as a moko kauai on this female could be portrayed as an atua called Riahoa, and it has a lot of spiritual significance to Te Ao Māori. We also know that AI is being trained on living people's moko kauai. So we do know that there's groups of people feeding AI images from Facebook, from the internet, from they're scanning books and feeding these images. So there is a possibility that the second image with the large lips and the stenciled moko kauai, and it's a high possibility that this moko kauai belongs to someone else. That there could be, and hopefully there's no one watching this that recognizes it as their own, but there's a possibility this has been stolen from someone else. And again, it's legal, but highly immoral. And then the third image, from a Te Ao Māori perspective, doesn't really look like Māori art. It looks kind of cheap and tacky. But again, it's you can tell that the man's chin, it looks like the data has been trained on the female's chin, the same sort of pattern. So we just, yeah, it's important to not encourage Māori art being used in generative AI. There's one argument that the world changes, that we need to embrace AI. We've gone from stone and wood carving implements in greenstone to using electrical drills, metal, our old bone, what do you call it, sharpened bone for tattoos has been replaced by tattoo guns, etc., etc. But the important thing is that for these traditional artists, they still know the tikanga, that they're not culturally offensive when they use these new technologies. When we're using AI for these technologies, we're giving away our intellectual property, we're giving away our mātauranga Māori, and we're ignoring tikanga. So the ramifications for that means that our tohunga, or our learned people with traditional knowledge, will one day become forgotten. And it's very reminiscent of the Tohunga Suppression Act, New Zealand legislation from the early 19th century, which made any traditional Māori knowledge illegal. And that legislation was only replaced in the 1960s. So my generation of Māori are the first generation to have not been subjected to the Tohunga Suppression Act. It also creates the issues of who actually owns that image. And again, legally, you can't copyright an image from artificial intelligence at this time. You can in China, but nowhere else in the world. So that creates a whole number of issues if you're using it for branding, for trademarks, etc. I was going to quickly just skip over, there's been research for traditional music and sounds. So there's overwhelmingly Māori aren't comfortable with the use of AI with music and their sounds. I've worked with individuals who have had their traditional flute music reproduced by artificial intelligence, added to commercial music, and not acknowledged. So there's a fear that by using artificial intelligence with any sort of music will remove commercial value, steal traditional knowledge, and basically just cause offence. So I'm just summing up. So I mean, Mātauranga Māori has the issues, has the answers to many issues that Māori today face. It's a matter of us looking backwards to be able to look forward. There's also it raises again, it reinforces the issue that we need more AI courses in New Zealand. We need more Mātauranga Māori being taught with AI in the education facility. And so so very quickly, the lessons learned by Māori is we know that the data is usually racist and biased. We know that in turn trains AI with the wrong data. So we do need humans to verify anything that we pump out of AI. We also know that, I'm going to skip that one for the sake of time, artificial intelligence, from a Māori point of view, we could be talking about giving AI legal personhood in the near future. And we just need to look at why the forest up in the Urewera, the river Waganui, and Mount Taranaki were given personhood. And we can apply those same principles to artificial intelligence that uses Māori data. And then we also know there's a wide fear in Te Ao Māori of AI taking jobs. And so when we look at these statistics, we know that Māori will be greatly impacted by automation in their jobs. So that's not something to be scared of. I think it's the role for society, and teachers play a big influence in this, is how do we offer different training for other jobs? Can we be, how do we change those jobs? We've done it before with the horse and cart. We've done it from the old cars that required mechanics without who didn't need knowledge of electricity and electronics. So there's plenty of opportunities here, in my opinion. And then I think this should be the final slide, and we have time. When you consider using artificial intelligence, it has a huge impact on Papatūānuku, on our environment. So we know that it takes, ChatGPT, the latest research tells us, it takes half a litre of water to cool the servers to write a 1,000-word email. Now that's only, when we consider that's only the English language, which is trained on, and it doesn't require extra characters such as macrons or other language scripts. And when we consider that ChatGPT is still learning other languages, when we're using it for Māori, these numbers will be a lot greater than just half a litre. So I think it's important that our students know the impact on the environment when they use artificial intelligence. And then just quickly, for anyone who wants to, a colleague of mine, we've created kiti.ai. It's a website with full of training resources for teachers and for students, where you can get knowledge, you can get free courses, and basically learn how to use AI. So kia ora. No. Oh, sorry. Key takeaways there.
Kia ora, Karaitiana. Thank you for your presentation. Your understanding of the intersection between culture and innovation challenges us to think critically about our responsibilities as teachers as we navigate the complexities of these emerging technologies. What you have shared with us today not only highlights the importance of Māori perspectives, but also serves as guidance for ethically integrating technologies into our practice. We truly appreciate the time and effort you took to share your knowledge with us. Your voice is essential in shaping the future that respects Indigenous rights and promotes true equity in the technological landscape. Thank you once again for your invaluable contribution and for inspiring us all to think bigger and more inclusively. It's clear that there is a lot more that you know in this space, and I just want to remind everyone that we will share your slides out with everybody tomorrow so that they've got quick access to them. Thank you, Karaitiana. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. As our education landscape evolves rapidly, the integration of advanced technologies like generative AI presents both exciting opportunities and critical responsibilities. Ruth is here today to share her insights on navigating this complex terrain, with a focus on ensuring that our initiatives lead to equitable outcomes for both current and future generations. With a rich background in early childhood education, Ruth brings a unique perspective on the challenges and possibilities that lie ahead. She is passionate about supporting teachers, recognising that they are the backbone of our children's learning experiences. Today, Ruth will share her thoughts on how we can foster ethical practices and provide the necessary support for teachers, empowering them to harness the potential of generative AI responsibly and thoughtfully. Please join me in welcoming Ruth Murray as she takes us on a journey through the intersection of education, technology, and ethics, illuminating the path towards a brighter, more equitable future for all. Thank you, Ruth.
Kia ora tātou katoa. Ngā mihi, thank you for that lovely welcome, Roseanne. And if we could maybe move to the next slide, that would be great. Kei ko ara ki te maika ko waitaku te awa ko taku timi te waka ko kaitahu te iwi. Ko hikarangi i te maunga ko waiapu te awa ko taku timi te waka ko Ngāti Porou te iwi. No Waipounamu, me tai rāwhiti o ka tupuna kei te noho au ki Tuahiwi. Ko Mars toko hua rangatira. Ko James Rato, ko Raquel, ko Grace, a ko Tamariki, ko Ruth O. Kia ora, I've had the privilege of being in education and specifically early childhood education for over 30 years. I've served as a kaiako in a variety of roles in different services and organisations, the majority here in Aotearoa, but also in Australia and the UK. Since graduating in 1992, there have been a number of significant developments, changes, as I'm sure a lot of you will be aware within the profession. The publication of Te Whāriki, He Whāraki, Mātauranga mō ngā mokopuna o Aotearoa, our bicultural curriculum, the ECE regulations, licensing criteria to Arapautama, indicators of quality for early childhood education, what matters most, to just name a few of them. There's been lots of various funding models and tools implemented, from the introduction of 20 hours ECE to more recently pay parity, and all of the versions of that. Alongside these, and with these changes, early childhood has, I believe, not only been responsive to societal changes, ongoing educational research, but also to change brought about by the ongoing development of technology. And it was great, actually, that Dr. Karaitiana went through some of those things that we've seen. It's here that I'd like to provide a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm no expert on either technologies such as AI, generative AI, or education. I did eagerly upskill to learn what was required with an approved student management system, so that the calculation of hours for funding no longer needed to be a manual task back in the day. I'm sure many of you, if you recall what that was like, that was a tedious task, and that was if you got right and took hours. So we're very happy for the SMS systems that came. I am, however, an educator who believes in the value of critical reflection, ongoing learning, equitable outcomes, and holding myself accountable to the vision that underpins Te Whāriki, that tamariki are competent and confident learners and communicators, healthy in mind, body, spirit, secure in their sense of belonging and in the knowledge that they make a valued contribution to society. Regarding our topic today, this means that along with my colleagues, we've been engaged in working collaboratively to research and consider what our approach to this new horizon will be, unpacking what the ethical considerations are that we as kaiako leaders need to be aware of when we're implementing and using generative AI and ECE in Aotearoa. As we try to understand the technology, we must operate with open-mindedness to see the limitations and also the opportunities. A whakatauki I feel is of relevance, and I actually believe that Dr. Kaitiana was referring to this within his titiro whakamuri ko kuri whakamua, looking back and reflecting so that you can move forward. And that's similar to ka mua ka muri, looking forward while we look backwards, and moving forward while looking backwards. As we move forward into the quickly evolving and ever expanding world of AI, how do we do so while looking back? What are the learnings we have from the past in our tipuna ancestors that will help and guide us on this journey? For some, this journey may be relatively new, while for others, I imagine that you will have either been immersed in or exploring the AI world for some time. To embrace the potential of AI tools requires that we recognize their limitations and continuously be considering what tools, why, when, how, and by whom are they implemented and used within our spaces and places. Understanding where they have come from and ensuring that the cultural values and aspirations of whānau are not only respected, but also continue to lead and be reflected in our teaching practices. What has influenced and guided me in preparing for this and my ongoing mahi is our shared values as educators within Aotearoa of whakamana, manaakitanga, pono, and whanaungatanga. Though my focus is specifically from within an early childhood context, kohunga context, the standards and code of professional responsibility apply to us all. So hopefully covers the broad range of everyone participating today in this symposium. How are we leading in our sphere of influence? Or should that be, are we leading? When I started looking into this, I learned that in Aotearoa, currently the Ministry of Education does not have a framework or set of unified principles for the use of AI within education. As at the moment, the Ministry of Education advises that they are developing policies and advice so that the education system is well prepared for the likely increasing impact AI is going to have on it. The guidance given to support teachers and school leaders is outlined as shown here and links to further information within certain aspects. However, even just this week, I saw it on the news, the lack of care policy is a challenge. And we know that right now, teachers are using this technology. This is in comparison to Australia, which published in October 2023, what you see here, which is the Australian Framework for Generative AI in Schools. And the framework set out, and it's designed to help the school communities, students, teachers, it takes into account everybody, support education outcomes, ethical practices. So under education outcomes, it talks about, it aims to recognise how the appropriate use of generative AI tools can enhance teaching and learning outcomes for all members of Australian school communities. Ethical practices, the framework aims to achieve the safe, responsible and ethical use of generative AI tools in Australian schools. Equity and inclusion, the framework aims to ensure that generative AI tools are used in ways that are fair, accessible and inclusive of all Australian school communities. These goals are the basis of its 6 principles and 25 guiding statements. And the principles are, as you can see here, teaching and learning, human and social well-being, transparency, fairness, accountability, privacy, security and safety. Though this framework may be useful when you are looking for some guidance around how you may consider implementing AI within your early childhood or school and context, ideally there would already be a New Zealand framework for education. And so I think it's been covered with some of what Dr. Kaitiana was saying today. Pono is such an important value for us, and that's showing integrity by acting in ways that are fair, honest, ethical, and just. And so I'm just going to touch on some of those points that I know he has also already touched on. So some of them are, what are the ethical considerations we need to be aware of when we're implementing and using this generative AI? So the AI Forum New Zealand has a number of resources which are available. And in July this year, I believe, they published the AI Blueprint for Aotearoa. And their principles, which were published, and I have that you can see today, are similar. There's similarities with the Australian framework, which we just had a look at. And the 5 principles are fairness and justice, reliability, security and privacy, transparency, human oversight and accountability, as well as well-being. Fairness and justice is listed as number 1, and as you can see within it, it states that the designers, developers, and users of AI systems must respect the applicable laws in New Zealand and other relevant jurisdictions, human rights recognised under domestic and international law, rights of Māori articulated in Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and democratic values, including the electoral process and informed public debate, principles of equality and fairness, so that AI systems do not unjustly harm, exclude, disempower, or discriminate against individuals or particular groups. Reflecting on the key value of pono, showing integrity by acting in ways that are fair, honest, ethical, and just. Is it ethical to be using AI tools that are not open and transparent about where or how they have sourced their data? Are we being just and upholding the rights of Māori as articulated in Te Tiriti o Waitangi if we are using such an AI tool to translate text to Te Reo Māori? Māori data sovereignty, and I know this has been covered, but I think it's really important, and I just think it aligns with what Dr. Kalaitiana has shared with you. The rights and interests that Māori have to their digital information and its ethical distribution. And the aim is to protect knowledge and information that comes from uniquely Māori sources. And I think that this is of great importance for us as educators. And I would encourage you all to watch there's a short video, and all the links are going to be given at the end of this, which I know will be shared to you. And that little video is called ChatGPT, AI and Māori Data Sovereignty, and it's from the Science Learning Hub. And in it, Associate Professor Taka Keegan highlights 3 concerns, which were similar to the ones which are outlined by Dr. Kalaitiana today, where particularly around ChatGPT, where did it source it started to be able to speak to Reo Māori? It's currently free, but when it costs, the makers of GPT, except ChatGPT, will be the ones who profit. So it's about that that we heard earlier about those who are translators. It's taken their job and their roles from them. And as it's free, fast, and works, it's going to, we're going to see, and as more people use it, it's going to actually shift, so that the language is going to start to shift, and it's ChatGPT and AI tools such as that controlling our language, not our traditional holders. So yeah, that video, which will be linked, is ChatGPT, AI and Māori Data Sovereignty, for you to have a look at it. There's another one that was put up by Design Assembly around whose artificial intelligence, reflecting on the intersection of AI and Te Ao Māori. And then another one which was published on Papareo in earlier last year, I believe it was OpenAI's Whisper is another case study in colonisation. So just those themes that you can hear coming through again to be considerate of. On that note, Papareo, I just would like to mention them. It's a project, it's a combination of work that's been undertaken by Te Reo Irirangi or Te Hiku o Te Ika, Te Hiku Media, over the last 30 years to install, nurture and proliferate the Māori language unique to the haukainga of Te Hiku o Te Ika. And they have made a presentation that you also might like to watch, which is on AI for Good, around the accelerating the revitalisation of Te Reo Māori with AI. And their kaupapa is enabling a sovereign digital future for Indigenous languages. So again, picking up on what Dr. Kalaitiana was talking about earlier. We'll just move to the next slide. Privacy is another key consideration for all educators, and the New Zealand's Office of the Privacy Commissioner has released specific expectations that you can see here. for people and organisations to be mindful of with regards to AI and privacy. So the Artificial Intelligence and Information Privacy Principles, as it states within it, the 13 information IPPSs apply to each stage of building and using AI tools. And it gives some really key questions to ask and to reflect on when using AI to ensure you're meeting your obligations. So is the training data behind an AI tool relevant, reliable, and ethical? And that's talking about how we only collect the information that we need. We get the information where possible from the person directly. We be clear about what the information is going to be used for, and use fair and reasonable ways of collecting that information. What was the purpose for collecting it? Is your use related to that? And how are you testing that AI tools are accurate and fair for your intended purpose? Are you talking with people in communities with an interest in these? And doing a privacy impact assessment may require engagement with the community, and we know that in education that we do that and ensure that we are including Māori to help us understand and uphold fairness and accuracy. And then finally, what are you doing to track and manage new risks to information from the AI tools? Security sits alongside and with privacy. So stakeholders must ensure AI systems and their related data are reliable, accurate, secure, and the privacy of the individuals is protected throughout the AI system's life cycle, with potential risks identified and managed on an ongoing basis. So as with all digital technology, what security do you currently have in place, and is it fit for purpose? Do you have robust systems and processes in place for if ever there was a data breach? And how are we training and supporting kaiako and teachers to be cognizant of these ethical considerations when implementing AI? I believe that through further professional development opportunities such as these, and with the active engagement of you as educators, the greater the likelihood that there'll be more emphasis on ethics and process over product. And how are we taking quality leadership within this space? Who is? Where is the unique voice of early childhood, and in particular, early childhood in Aotearoa? So in my research, it's limited. And some things, though, that I'd like to draw your attention to is some podcasts. Again, the links will be provided. So there's one which was held earlier this year. A group of educational early years leaders within the USA got together, and it was called Chat ECE, How AI Could Aid the Early Educator Workforce, and Can AI Aid the Early Educator Workforce was a publication, which the link is in, and within that publication that'll be shared with you, there's another link so that you can listen to that podcast and hear what the discussions were. As well as that, Sami Kazi, who's the regional director, has had some articles published, and one of them was AI in Early Childhood, 6 Things Teachers Need to Know. And she states that applications for AI present a myriad of issues, and as AI gradually becomes an integral part of education, the following are some considerations future teachers need to keep in mind. 1, learn to monitor the use of machine learning in early childhood education. Educators need to spend time getting to know the child, understanding their family and community, observing them, examining their work, and using authentic, valid, and reliable assessment methods to know their interests, strengths, personalities, and motivations. 2, to act as advisors to programmers. To collaborate in advocating for responsible and ethical use of AI in education, and to ensure that any AI that is used follows acceptable standards. Remember our priorities as early childhood educators. We need to be asking questions like, Who has ownership of the data collected by AI? Who has access to the data? What measures are in place to monitor and protect it? And how are AI systems trained? Who trains them? What went into their algorithms? And what are the objectives? As I'm sure you'll know and be aware, there are currently lots of different systems and tools used by early childhood services in Aotearoa to assist with the many and varied administrative tasks and to support assessment, planning and evaluation, real-time communication between families and kaiako, publish newsletters, etc. One provider, Story Park, recently published a blog titled Exploring AI in Early Childhood Education, Our Considered Approach. In it, Jamie McDonald shared how Story Park, like us all, have been thinking about AI and their reasoning for this. He also outlined the approach of working closely with educators and experts. When it comes to working with young children and their families, we know technology can't substitute the nurturing approach and connections our educators create. Instead, we're striving to use technology to empower educators and to support the critical work they do. He goes on to outline Story Park's responsible AI commitments and asks for the reader to submit their opinions on artificial intelligence and how we can be better reflective practitioners in our use of it, asking, what place do you see AI having in ECE and in your organisation? What do we need to be mindful of, and what does best practice look like to you? Whanaungatanga whakamana. Here is a great opportunity for us to engage in a positive and collaborative relationship with the wider community, in this case, the developers of a system, to provide guidance from uniquely New Zealand early childhood perspective. And I would encourage you all to consider doing so if you haven't already, whether as teams, as an individual, or as a centre organisation. We're just going to watch this little clip.
Hey everyone, here is a quick tip on how you can save more time using LoveHeart with our new updated feature, Coach Sue. Let's go. When you've created a learning story, Coach Sue will pop up making suggestions on a where to next. There is also an option to head into a coaching session to help support you and gather more ideas to extend on your learning for the child. Once you've selected one of the suggestions, you can now go ahead and choose a follow-up date. For this example, I'm choosing the week after. Click send and boom, a learning plan has been created for you, ready to implement.
So we should approach, and I just wanted you to see that little clip because that is another specifically designed for ECE system, LoveHeart AI. And at the start of the year, they published on their blog why embracing AI in early childhood education is a leap forward, not a step back. And I'm going to preface this by saying we should approach all new technology asking what problem are we trying to solve. Depending on what these are, will channel us to the right tool. But in this blog, they stated that it will enhance efficiency, streamline documentation, allowing educators to devote more time to hands-on teaching and interaction with children. It empowers educators, augments educators' capabilities without replacing their invaluable intuition and expertise. It prepares for a tech-driven future, integrating technology in a way that enhances learning outcomes and prepares children for a technologically advanced world. It acts as a co-pilot, not a plagiarist. Ethical use and individual responsibility. They state how the ethical use of AI in ECE is paramount, and the emphasis is on training and adherence to ethical codes, ensuring that AI tools are used to complement, not compromise, the educator's role. Again, I would encourage you to consider how you might work with developers such as LoveHeart AI and others if you're going to be using their tools to provide those insights of what they need to be mindful of, the ethical considerations that have been shared today, some of which are unique to Aotearoa. From conversations with colleagues and planning considering and planning to use the AI systems within the early childhood context. The focus currently is on them being used by educators, administrators, versus directly with tamariki, which as may be occurring within schools. This is not surprising given the age restrictions on permissions for use. They see these systems as tools which will be used to assist with those administrative tasks in a similar way to what earlier systems have in the past, and to the new possibilities, being able to use the ability of AI systems to support assessment and planning differently. Be able to generate very quickly documented, as you just saw in that little clip, documented observations with connections to curriculum and learning goals for a given child, suggested next steps through to detailing out what resources would be needed to support or implement them. Be able to translate into different languages to support reciprocal relationships with parents, families, and capture the aspirations of their diverse communities, and be able to provide mentoring support for beginning teachers. They recognise and have highlighted that they can only ever be used in consultation and with the prior engagement and permission of parents whānau and approval of the spaces where they work. That they require human oversight and the role of peer review to check what is being produced. Their responsibility to understand how they work to meet their ethical obligations and demystify this for others. And their responsibilities for upskilling and training that will be required in order to effectively and ethically implement such tools. What is the purpose? How do we challenge ourselves to use the technology to support our kaiako learner and their whānau? It's not just about creating learning stories that links to the curriculum in a more efficient manner. We must consider how we're using the technology of AI to better connect and to communicate, engage with whānau. Thinking back to how I began, what is our why, our rationale for their use? What considerations are we given to ensuring equitable outcomes for current and future generations? If it is for efficiency and to save time, then what are we using the time that we save for? How does its impact on outcomes for Pepe, Tamaiti, Tamariki, whānau, and community we work in partnership with? If it is for mentoring, providing pedagogical advice, guidance, then where is this sourced from? And what peer review oversight are you providing? And how does this impact on outcomes for Pepe, Tamaiti, Tamariki, whānau, and community we work in partnership with? Manaakitanga, creating a welcoming, caring, and creative learning environment that treats everyone with respect and dignity. How are we uplifting the mana of our tamariki, parents, and whānau and profession throughout this journey? How are we looking to the past as we move forward? Mō tātou a mō ka uri a muri a ki nei, for us and our children after us. Nā reira, ngā mihi.
Thank you, Ruth, for that really enlightening conversation. You know, at the start, you said that you're not an expert, but it is very clear to me that you've put a lot of research, thought, and sense making into this space. Your insights into leading in the generative AI space are both inspiring and thought-provoking. We appreciate your emphasis on ethics and the importance of training and support for teachers. Your vision for integrating technology in a responsible and thoughtful manner will undoubtedly help shape our approach moving forward. We are grateful for the knowledge you have shared with us and with the whole profession, and the passion that you bring to this vital conversation. Thank you once again for being with us today and for your invaluable contribution to our community.
Thank you very much for joining us today and taking part in these discussions. Kua ea ki runga, kua ia ki raro, I ronga whakaarihia ki ronga, kia tina, tina, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.